everyone, welcome to TERF WARS. I hope you can all hear me. Please let me know in the chat as soon as you can if you can hear me and the sound is all good. Welcome back everyone. Welcome to season 2 episode 7 of This Week in the TERF WARS, the show where I basically go through the week's worth of anti-trans, transphobic, gender critical, TERF nonsense, and we laugh at it together, we debunk it together, we talk about the ridiculous schemes they've been up to this week because every single week it's something new. Anyway, yes, welcome. So the first thing I'm going to do is open this beer on stream. So this got sent to me very kindly by Queer Brewing. Oh, it's probably inverted. Whoops. And they sent me this nice glass and I drank 2 of them earlier in the week, which was really nice. But yeah, I just thought I'd say this isn't like a paid promotion or anything. It was just kind of them to send me and I thought it was themed to be drinking queer beer on TERF WARS. So let's go for it. Cheers to everyone. Happy Friday. This is apparently a pale ale. Oh, this is one of these magic situations where the tiny cup fits the whole giant can, I think. Or nearly. But anyway, what are all you drinking? It's disgusting. No, it's nice. Thank you very much to the team there. Anyway, so this show, basically, as I was saying, we go through and we debunk loads of nonsense. And the point of the show is to look at the arguments and like debunk the arguments, laugh at the arguments. And so I've censored all of the names and made it so you can't see who's saying them in most cases. And that's so we can look at the arguments and not the people. So don't go and search these people down. This isn't about harassing people. That said, this week there's quite a few where I haven't censored them because they're like influential people. So if it's like big organizations or, you know, influential names that are sort of in the news and stuff, then sometimes it's relevant to keep them in because that's the best way to keep track of the nonsense that's going on. So anyway, so last week there was a couple of main themes. There was the juice fiasco, there was the Scientology thing. This week there's not like a main theme, but there's lots of brain rot. Like when I was sorting it into different sections before I was putting on, the brain rot section was like half of the show. So prepare your brains to rot right out. But saying that, we're going to start with something nice. So this is from the UK's Gender Recognition Act Reform Inquiry, where people are allowed to submit their views on the Gender Recognition Act. It's all a load of bullshit, really, at the moment. It's quite clear that they should reform it, but they're resisting it as much as they can. But so they're all published publicly, and some of my friends have been reading through all of them. And this was one that one of my friends found that says, I am 90 years old and I have a close member of the family in my and had a close member of my family transition. If only the government would leave trans people alone and stop trying to regulate them, they would be able to get on with their lives with less persecution. She isn't making life difficult for anyone else. Why does the government have to make it difficult for her? The stress that it causes the whole family is unbelievable, and I find far more support, empathy and kindness is required rather than the bureaucracy that is currently presented to transgender individuals. And it's just nice that, like, there's so much of this bullshit narrative that, you know, like, oh, it's just young kids with all their crazy new things, and, oh, it's just, no, you know, women don't like this. But, as we've seen in yet another poll this week, most women who have an opinion on this support it, and most people just don't care. So, nonsense. But anyway, here's a 90-year-old woman who is in support and understands trans people. So it's not difficult. It's all just propaganda bullshit. Anyway, from this moment onwards, going forwards, the rest of the episode is brain rot. So I apologise, everyone. There's some good ones this week. So the manufactured scare nonsense of the week from the gender critical people this time was this. So here's something from the Washington Examiner, but like all of the major news sites picked this up and ran with the same bullshit story. In an effort to be trans friendly, a hospital is advising nurses to no longer use words such as breastfeeding and breast milk. Human milk and chest milk are more acceptable terms for midwives to use. Okay, so let's have a look at the article. Midwives have been told to say chest feeding instead of breastfeeding and to replace the term mother with mother or birthing parent as part of moves to be more trans friendly. Blah, 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 blah. More of the same. All of the articles were like this. And then if you click through and read their actual guidelines, it says we are taking a gender additive approach to the language used to describe ourselves. For us, a gender additive approach means using gender neutral language alongside gender inclusive language in perinatal services. That was the title. Alongside the language of womanhood in order to ensure that everyone is represented and included. So this is them saying we're going to say things like woman and breastfeeding, but we're also going to bear in mind that some people are trans people, some people are non-binary parents, some people are trans men who give birth, and they might not use those terms. I mean, that's quite explicitly what they've said here. They've said, we're not getting rid of the old language, we're adding on to it. And all of the newspapers reported it as if trans people had just suddenly erased women and they were banned from saying breastfeeding, is PC gone mad? Which is totally fabricated. And the reason they've done this is literally just to make people angry at trans people. There's no possible, no one read this and actually thought, oh, they've replaced, motherhood with parenthood or whatever. Someone saw this and realised that they could make a load of outrage clicks by getting people angry at trans people. And that's literally this whole story, and it's completely fabricated. No trans people are saying, oh, I never want you to say breastfeeding ever again. I mean, what a joke. They're just saying, look, for 0.3%, or well, probably significantly less than 0.3% of people who are giving birth, just beware that not everyone is totally on board with being referred to as a mother when they're not a woman. So it's just such a joke. There's so many of these stories where they just, the whole internet outrage machine invents something to get angry about trans people about, and we're just not even aware of it. I remember one morning waking up and the whole American conservative news outrage machine was angry because trans people were demanding to make gender neutral Father Christmas. I was like, what? I've never seen that. I've literally never seen that in my life. I talk to thousands of trans people every single week. And all of these things are just made up. And literally just to enrage people about trans people. Anyway, complete joke. That was a huge story this week. And of course now it's just a thing. And there are just loads of people who just believe this now. Because it won't ever get corrected. No one's powerful enough to sue any of these newspapers to tell them to stop making things up like this. It's just, that's it. That's a meme now. Done. Someone made it up. So, on the theme of completely making up things about language changes, here's Mayor Forstater, who is in a fiasco where she's trying to sue someone for firing her for being transphobic, kind of. But anyway, she's posted her own article several times this week about where there's a new maternity bill where basically they want politicians to still be able to keep their jobs even if they give birth, which is obviously a good idea. So they're just changing this law, and she's saying they're making it say pregnant person rather than pregnant women. This is the end of women. All this kind of stuff, going on. How about this attack on language and all the same stuff, all the same nonsense. But if you look at the bill, they're actually discussing people having maternity leave, people still being able to keep their jobs after they've given birth, which was written in 1996, the Employment Rights Act, right, 1996. It doesn't say the word woman in it, but it does say pregnancy, and it does discuss people. It's just generic language. It's just, you just want to cover as many people as you can. It's just manufactured outrage. It's just ridiculous. It's so tiring. And, you know, the reason they do this, for like the rank and file gender critical people, like they do it because they're outraged. But the reason that all of the bigger names do this, and the reason the journalists and stuff make this up, isn't because they genuinely think it. They would do 5 minutes of research and find this. It's because they know they can make people angry with this stuff. And that's the whole point of it. It's just like the way that trans people can like win people over to our side is to meet them and say, like, hey, we're normal people, or to have the scientists step in and be like, well, actually, we've done a load of research and this is the best thing for trans people. The way they win people over is just scaring people. Like, that's their main thing. They're erasing women. Like, here's a picture of a scary person playing sports. Like, that's their main strategy. And so that's why they do it, because they know it works. Like, whether they are consciously deciding to do that, or whether it's like subconscious and they just know that writing this kind of scaremonger articles get them the most support. I don't know. I think it's a mix, but it's just so frustrating. It's so pathetic. Anyway, this was actually like, okay, it was a good moment because this guy who I wasn't aware of, who's a journalist, like spoke his mind about the gender critical movement and particularly LGB Alliance. But he received a load of abuse for it, obviously. So obviously that's not the good bit that I'm laughing at. But his opening message is pretty good. He says, just got a lovely little message from the LGB Alliance. I hope they understand where I'm coming from, and I hope I wasn't too vague regarding where I stand on their anti-trans hate agenda. So it's a little bit small, but it says, so LGB Alliance have messaged him over something he said or whatever. And they said, hi, we think you've been misinformed about our organisation. We'd be happy to meet with you and explain our concerns. Best wishes, Bev Jackson and Kate Harris. And he said, hi, thanks so much for reaching out. Please, it is really important to me that I send you this message. Go and fuck yourselves forever, you fucking hateful bigots. I despise everything you stand for and always will. Go to hell and don't ever contact me again. Yes, mate. It's good to see like people encountering these people for the first time and working it out and not being, you know, buying into their rubbish. Anyway, he obviously got the gender critical welcome party, got a huge pile-on, got loads of disgusting insults, got mass reported, like the works. There was some really like disgusting stuff said to this guy. There was some more reasonable gender critical reactions, like this one, who's from quite a big gender critical person, who said, you know those accounts you've just acknowledged as a... sorry, my readings are rubbish today. You know those accounts you've acknowledged are abusive and toxic to the debate? Look at your screenshot. Go and have a bath or something. Like, trying to say, you're the one who's saying fuck here. They're the ones trying to reach out. I hate this so much. This is such a common, like, bigot strategy. They come in and they say, very politely, oh, we want to take away all of your human rights. Would you like to hear from us? And then when you're like, fuck off, they're like, oh, like, you're the crazy one. You're the abusive and toxic one. It is not abusive or toxic or impolite to tell someone who wants to ruin your life to fuck off. Like, that is it's significantly ruder to campaign against someone's human rights than it is to say go fuck yourselves in response. Like, that's such a step down to just tell someone to fuck off. And like, they all know this. Well, no, they don't all know this, but like the bigger accounts that are claiming to be feminists are completely aware of this dynamic where, you know, classically misogynists will be saying, oh, you know, we want to take away women's rights, and then women get angry at them and say, fuck off, it's my body, I should be able to do what I want. And they're like, oh, you know, look who's being abusive and toxic, you can't even have an opinion on a woman's body anymore. Like, it's the same stuff. And of course it's the same stuff because it's the same thing. It's people attacking people's rights and trying to seem like the reasonable ones about it. But of course we've got loads of disgusting replies. I wasn't sure about putting this one in, but I just wanted to show like how this is standard. Like, if you're a bigger account, particularly if you're a woman, cis woman and you speak out in favour of trans rights, then you're going to get stuff like this. So this person says, you have a Muslim DNA in you. No wonder, of course, you hate women. No wonder you don't give a damn about women. Like, just plainly racist, disgusting, doing the same thing where they're trying to use women as like some kind of, you know, oh, we're not actually racist. We're fighting for women's rights. Like this, it's the same thing. They've just learned that they can use women as a shield, which itself is misogynistic. To, you know, say, oh, I'm not being racist by making some disgusting comment about your DNA. I'm defending women. No, you're being kind of misogynistic and horrifically racist. And also, seeing as this is the real basic biology team, a Muslim DNA. What are you on about? It doesn't make any sense. Muslim isn't a genetic thing. Like, I saw someone in the comments pointing out, like, obviously loads of comments saying you're racist and reporting them. And someone else is also like, Islam's only been around for 1,400 years, so it probably hasn't affected the human genome. Nonsense. Anyway, I thought this interaction was also quite telling. So this person, who has an I stand with JKR profile picture, because of course they do, has said, steady on, Oz. Even Twitter says you're being hateful. And like some people see these things, you know, where someone's been reported for hateful conduct, and you're like, oh gosh, you know, maybe they've been hateful back. Maybe he said something disgusting back. So let's just break this down. So to start, they've said that Twitter's reported him for being hateful. But the Twitter report they've linked says, for violating our rules against promoting or encouraging suicide or self-harm. So that's not being hateful, because they have a category for hateful conduct. So that was already straight off, that's a lie. Then he clarifies, I told someone to jump off a cliff 4 years ago for denying the Assad regime used chemical weapons. And then people like you trawled my mentions to find any example of alleged violent language to try and imply things about me that aren't true. So this is so standard. I've had this happen to me 3 times. You say something the gender critical people don't like, and so they go through all of your tweets, everything you've ever done, and report it out of context. Doesn't matter what it is. They just want to, like, delete your account, silence you, like, get revenge, basically. So they went and found something where he was telling some, like, genocide apologist to fuck off. Again, with this, like, oh, he's the real bad guy because he's told some, like, Assad apologist to go away. Like, ridiculous. So it's worth noting that you can't say this kind of stuff on Twitter if you're going to argue with gender critical people, because they have no integrity or standards on this, and they will just report you. So the first time I got a 12-hour ban for hateful conduct was when a load of gender critical people decided that they were going to take their names off the organ donor register in case trans women were given their organs. And so I signed up to the organ donor register. I had been signed up to it. I had an abusive partner before who made sure I signed up for it. I probably shouldn't have said that on stream. Anyway, I re-signed up for the organ donor thing, and I said something like, can't wait to die and give my organs to cis people, like, or something. And that got flagged up as hateful for some reason. It had the word kill or die or something in it. Like, completely nonsense, but I mean vaguely related to trans people. But then the next time it happened to me, I was talking with some Australians about how Australians use the C word, cunt, very differently to Americans and British people. Like, in Australia, it's almost like you call your mum that. Like, everyone says the C word for everything all the time. And I said that, and I said, oh, Australians always say the C word, but obviously spelt the C word out, and got a 12-hour suspension for hateful conduct. And that was like 11 months after I'd said it. So they had gone through and obviously been searching my name and all of the different swear words and reporting every single one, and then they got me on one of them. So it's another reason I delete all my old tweets, because they do that kind of thing all the time. Anyway, then it turns out that this person had already been reported and had a ban for hateful conduct and abuse and harassment. So not only did they lie about what he got suspended for, not only did they bad faith report him for opposing a disgusting person, they also had done the very thing that they had lied about him doing. Of course, like, that's just 100%. I just feel like that just totally sums up this. This is what happens when you say, I think trans people should have the same rights as everyone else, and you've got more than 20,000 followers. Like, standard. Anyway, his LGB Alliance saying they've been blocked by him, and they're saying, pass on the message, do not threaten any of our supporters. Like, he obviously wasn't threatening anyone. If you do, we will have to take legal advice. Like, standard gender critical, threatening to sue you as soon as you disagree with them. And then your response to our invitation reeks of homophobia. Obviously not. So it turns out that this guy, so he came out as, I don't know if he came out on Twitter, I don't know, but he came out as queer as part of this, but probably beforehand as well. So he posted photos of him at Pride. But, like, I'm not saying that a queer person or a gay person can't be homophobic, but, like, this group said, do you want to meet us? And he said, fuck off because I think you're bigots. Like, that, it's just the same again. It's like the same using women as a shield, but here they're using gay people as a shield to deflect criticisms of their own bullshit positions. Grim. And this is my favourite bit of the whole fiasco, and I laughed so much at this. I had like 3 bouts of 10-minute laughing at this. So someone with gremlin hands, old profile picture, replied to him saying something or other. And this guy, Oz, assumed it was Gremlin Han. So he said, how's the job hunt going, you sad fuck? Must be hard after all your friends in the industry disowned you over your bigotry and radicalisation. And then I clicked, because I was like, oh, has Gremlin Han got a new profile? Click through, and the first word in his bio was husband. So, like, it wasn't Gremlin Han, but I then, kind of dickhead, replied saying, can't be the real Glenna as it says husband in the bio. Anyway, so this guy then says, on the plus side, Monty. They all call me Monty because it's a man's name, and they can do that pathetic, plausible deniability. That they're just saying I'm just saying your surname. Like, it's like a child. On the plus side, Monty, at least one of you can read. Like, that was his attempt at a comeback. So that was like, there's 2 layers of weak there, like, very pathetic. Like, my joke was a real knob comment, but it was quite good. But then someone replied, actually, this is the shoe lady, if anyone knows who I mean by shoe lady, like, shoe lady then replied, just going over to check if the real Graham has posted on this yet. Won't be long before he does. Can't wait to go to Graham's blog where he's going to post about this Twitter interaction. What a life, mate. Like, and then he's like, definitely, can't wait to go over and look at his blog. He's going to write to his audience of 300 about some Twitter people. Cool. So now we're into brain rot zone. That was like some of the main events of the week, the news. There's a lot of brain rot this week. I was saying that earlier, but like, prepare your brains, guys, because it's starting off this strong and it's going to stay this strong for a while. So I stumbled across 2 gender critical people, one from England and one from America, both not quite knowing the full gender critical law and only having part of it, and so having an argument about it. So one of them has said, there is no such thing as cis women, cis men, cisgender. Biden erased women. So this is a standard gender critical thing, like cis doesn't exist. It's part of their trying to shut trans people down from talking about their, like the oppression they face and the power dynamics and stuff. So, you know, there's no such thing as cis people as like a classic gender critical thing. And then this guy comes in with, yes, there is. Stop cis erasure, cis pride. I stand with J.K. Rowling. Both of these people are real, by the way. I've interacted with them both several times before. They're both just idiots. And I just, God, it's just funny. So, here's some cool kid who's come in to tell me off for something or other. As always, there's a lot of projection from Katie. It's a form of self-defense because nothing Katie has any substance. Comical, demented ramblings of the worst kind. Like this is a stand. I get this kind of reply like every single hour, where I'll say something like, if you oppose gay marriage, that's homophobic, and then they'll come in with some kind of, they won't want to address it. They won't be able to say what I've said is false. They'll just do some attack on my character. They always avoid saying my pronouns. Projection from Katie. It's a form of self-defense because nothing Katie says has any substance. Like, anyone would have said she there, but you're not going to because you're a child. Anyway, it's just made up. It just means nothing. They just want to have a go at me and they can't address what I've said. So anyway, I've said what bit of what I've said is projection. Like, what does that even mean? What are you trying to say? It's embarrassing dodging calling me she. Like, you're like a child. And then they said, you're a Trojan horse. What? What does that mean? Where does this come from? Yeah, like, I'm going to go into women's spaces and then 40 men are going to come out from it. It's like, it's just, I'm not even going to try and interpret what this person might have been saying. Just nonsense. Right, so this is something that I apologise for the people that I follow and interact with. So this is Emily, who you should all follow. She's great. She posted this like model of like a clitoris and the organs. It's like a diagram you've probably seen in science textbooks, just with a joke saying, how can you not find it when it looks like this? The top of the picture's cropped off there because of Twitter. And I retweeted it because, you know, this is kind of funny. And then someone replied to her, but obviously because they were stalking my timeline and they saw it, they replied to her saying, you're the expert, are you, Katie? I mean, what does that... What this is some jab at, like, you don't have a clitoris, which is false. But it just kind of makes it sound like they're accusing me of not being good in bed with women. Anyway, so someone else saw it and was like, why are you so weird and obsessive? And they're like, yeah, I'm the weirdo. Like, yes, you're the weirdo. You're the one who replied to someone who's not me, asking why I don't know where the clitoris is. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's just that's just so pathetic. I'm not even going to try and explain it. You can see how pathetic that is. This is why I need to do TERF wars, because things like this happen just all the fucking time, like hourly. Things like, I get people like this just all the time. And I just need to show people who are sane, who know how ridiculous this is. Buck Angel. Buck Angel is a fairly famous trans man who has decided that he is the only worthwhile trans person and all other trans people are bad. So he's come out with this definitely based on real life true thing. He says, I just heard being bisexual is now transphobic. Because it only represents two genders. These wingnuts keep trying to find something to be victims. When will the insanity stop? Pardon me. Gosh, that beer's a bit gassy. It is nice though. 3,500 likes. This is like his thing. There's a subset of trans people that do this, and this is their thing. They make something up about trans people that's bad, and then they're like, look how crazy trans people are. Please give me validation. Please, like, you've got to validate me. I'm the good one. I'm not like these crazy people I've just invented. And obviously all of the transphobes love it because it's a trans person who's accusing trans people of being bad. So he gets his validation, and the transphobes get their like extra reason to hate trans people. And trans people, including him, lose out because now everyone's angry at trans people because being bisexual is transphobic. That's just nonsense. So on the theme of sighing, this one's a bit sadder actually. So some BBC journalist in the week retweeted something from Safe Schools Alliance, which are one of these bring back Section 28 mandatory conversion therapy for trans kids like groups. Horrible people. And this lady has replied, and she's a gender critical woman who I've actually talked to on the phone, and she, like quite a long time ago. We met in discussion and realised that we at least had some common ground. Like she comes from a feminist background, she could see that I also have strong feminist views, and so, you know, we had a discussion, and we obviously disagreed because she was coming from a gender critical angle, but there were things that we could agree on, and it was like in a phase where I was putting a lot of effort into trying to talk to gender critical people, to hear them, to listen to their concerns, and to see if I can win them over and to understand their point of view. She was a nice person. But then, so I've said, is this a BBC journalist just uncritically sharing an anti-LGBT hate group? Yes, is the answer. And then she said, in the same way that a BBC journalist sharing anything from Stonewall would be sharing an anti-woman hate group. Like, I know this is kind of like just normal gender critical bullshit, but like it's always sadder when it's someone who you've seen used to at least have some kind of grip on reality, has like become really super indoctrinated. Like she did earlier this year, she actually asked if we wanted to talk again, and it was the end of last year, and I was like, well, not right now, because it's the Kira Bell thing, and I was quite depressed about it all. But like Stonewall, the largest LGBT rights organisation in Europe, like campaigned to get rid of Section 28 and for gay marriage, and saying they're an anti-woman hate group. It's so knee-deep in gender critical propaganda that literally anyone who is like pro-LGBT at all is suddenly like an anti-woman hate group. It doesn't make any sense at all. Like the group I'm talking about sent some like fundamentalist Christian DVD around to a load of primary schools where they're like, you know, being trans is disease, you should make sure that you convert your kids into cis people. Like, it's just so grim. Yeah, and I was like, fucking hell, mate. Like, what's wrong with you? You weren't this bad when we talked. She's like, firstly, Katie, Stonewall does not represent LGBT people. I mean, they don't represent them in that, like, you know, the government represents the people. Like, we didn't vote for Stonewall, but they are an organisation of LGBT people fighting for LGBT rights that have been fighting for LGBT rights for, like, decades. They very strongly support LGBT people, like, uncontroversially. Ugh. That was just a bit sad. A bit of a sad one in the week. This person, who I don't know, we get to laugh at instead, who was saying the same thing. Stop with your homophobia. Stonewall is an openly homophobic organisation. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, they've just learned that you can, when someone says, hey, you're transphobic, hey, you're homophobic, hey, you're being misogynistic, they just say it back. It doesn't mean anything to them. It's just a tool. They know if they say trans people are bad, then no one listens. But if they say trans people are homophobic, then some people listen because they're ready to listen to people who are saying someone's homophobic. So that's why they do it. So then they go as far as calling Stonewall openly homophobic. That's so ridiculous. So as soon as this picture came up, I bet everyone in chat sighed. For anyone who doesn't know, this is a picture of a man wrestling a woman, and the woman losing, and the man going on to win the tournament, which is obviously very scary because we don't want men in women's sports. And that's why all of the gender critical and TERFs, they love this picture and they share it all the time. Like, all the time. I think that most of the bigger transphobes have shared this at one point. There's one problem with it. So this guy's like, Joe Biden and co want it. So ladies, like Joe Biden, Democrats equality. There's one problem with this picture of this man beating this woman in wrestling, is that she's a cis woman and he's a trans man, and he doesn't want to compete with the women. But in the state at the time when this photo was taken that he lives in, which I think was Texas, the law banned trans people from competing with the sex that they are and made them compete with their birth sex. So that means that all of these transphobic people who don't want trans women in women's sports and don't want trans men in men's sports, but they don't really care, like, the law that caused this is what they want. It's such a cell phone. Like, it's actually incredible. And it's not like the first time I saw this, like everyone went mad and like, this is such a cell phone. This is such a cell phone. Like, no one's going to embarrass themselves this bad ever again. And then like next week, another one of them shares it and they will like it again. And they will write their scary comments about, oh, trans women are evil. And you're like, mate, didn't you see last week someone got humiliated for this? And then the next week, another one posts it. And this happened like 3 years ago or something, 2 years ago. Like, he now competes with the men, I heard, because they changed the regulations. So how are people still sharing this? Like, it just goes to show that none of their positions are, like, this guy who shared this didn't read something and come to some conclusion. He literally saw this picture, shared it, and that was his argument. It convinced him. He knew it would convince his followers. Doesn't matter where it comes from. Didn't even do 1 second research into what it is, what it represents, and then doesn't care. Like, so many people, like, here only 8 people replied, but loads of people replied saying, mate, this is literally what you want. This is a product of a law you're currently campaigning for with this picture. And they don't delete it. They don't apologise. They're not embarrassed. They don't care. It's not important to them that, like, it's a scary picture. Trans people bad. Done. Who cares? It's rotting my brain. I hope you can feel the brain rot. This has been a brain rot week. This has been a brain rot week. Okay, so just need more of this queer beer. I'll keep going. So this person. So we're on to some of the conspiracy theory stuff here. So this person's like, you have the support of governments and, of course, giant rich conglomerates. You're not grassroots. You're not the underdog. You're the man. Like, talking about trans people. Yeah, trans people are the man, mate. Yeah, definitely. That's why 0% of all politicians are trans people. Of course, we have so much control. Like, all those trans CEOs all over the world. It's just the generic conspiracy theory. Like, all of these conspiracy movements, they pick a minority to hate on, and then they claim they run the media, they claim they run all of the companies, they claim they run the government. Like, it's this New World Order nonsense, and it'd be about, like, Jews or gay people or someone else if it wasn't about trans people. Anyway, this person's replied, like, just surface level analysis. If we were powerful, we wouldn't be fighting for the right to go to the toilet. Like, why would trans people's rights be on the line if we had some powerful ability to change the laws? It doesn't make any sense. And they're like, no, you're not. Women are fighting to retain the public toilets we fought for. Trans people literally piss everywhere they want, like goddamn dogs. Like, it's just, like, dehumanization, I think, in the British gender critical movement, dehumanization of trans people, which is essential to hold some of their views. You can't campaign to take healthcare away from children without dehumanizing them. You just can't. Some people can, but not this many people. But it's getting worse, I feel, in the last 18 months. And you get things like this. Trans people piss everywhere like goddamn dogs. No, we don't. We piss in the toilets, just like everyone else. And we have your entire life, and you're not fighting to retain. They love... The word retain is a gender critical meme on its own. Just retain. Like, that's it. If it says retain, then they do not know what they're talking about. Because they're not fighting to retain anything, because they want to change the law to ban us from doing something that we've done our entire lives. So that's literally definitionally false. You're not retaining something if your only thing is to try and change something. It's just standard gender critical rubbish. talking of rubbish, like, it's a complete idiot. I wasn't, like, I've got a lot of slides this week. I wasn't so sure about putting this one in, but it's just more of just like the brain rot. So the Women Equalities Committee for the UK was like, we're going to carry on our gender recognition reform bullshit. They're still talking about it. Complete nonsense. So I said, are you accepting plagiarized evidence this time? Because last week, if you remember, the top submission from like the most credible gender critical people to the government and the most important evidence submitting phase was most likely plagiarized, because of course it was. You know, allegedly, I can't say that for certain, but like Turnitin, some software that measures plagiarism, had like 40% plagiarism score for it. Anyway, and then this person's come back to this. I mean, mine's a snide comment, but I'm still like kind of making a comment here, like, are you going to address the plagiarism? They replied about that, and they're not going to address the plagiarism, by the way. The government's just like, no, we don't care. And then this person comes back with, you mean like plagiarizing males who identify as women? That's just so weak. Why are you so bad at this? Like, they saw plagiarizing, and then in their mind that was like copying, and then they were like, trans women just copy cis women, and then they tried to turn that into a joke, and then they had to put the word identify in because it's one of the words that gets them offended, and then they just put some words on the sentence in a laughing face and just thought, haha, I've done a joke. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make grammatical sense. It doesn't make sense as a joke. It's not structure. Like, I could do a better job than you. I could be a better gender critical person than 99% of gender critical people, because I know which of their arguments contradict each other, and at least wouldn't say them in the same 24 hours as each other. And I wouldn't make terrible attempts at trying to shoehorn in some ridiculous joke about some word I'm offended by. God, bloody hell. Oh, I'm in proper rant mode. It's so frustrating. Why can't they like? Why are our rights under threat from people this stupid? Ugh. It doesn't get any better. We're into maximum brain rot territory now. So this person sums up the issue with trans people. So everyone imagine, this is quite an important, this is a very good analogy. If you were in a restaurant that appears to be a taco joint and you ordered a taco, but when they bring you a hot dog instead, would you not be confused or upset? What if you don't like hot dogs and say so, and the taco joint is telling you that you're a bigot for not liking hot dogs? What are you talking about? You don't order people off a menu. You don't, this, like, this is, I think this is about attraction, and they're like trying to say, oh, what if I was attracted to a woman and then she had the wrong genitals, hence why they picked hot dog and taco? Well, then you'd say, I'm not attracted to people with those genitals, I'm sorry, and then they say, oh, that's a shame. Like, but I will bear your analogy in mind, mate. Next time that I am ordering women off a menu, that's when it will be relevant. Until then, it doesn't make any sense. Go away. Use your brain, my goodness. So this one's a bit more grim. This is such a typical gender critical thing to do. They use a lot of words to say it, and they'll use their own meme where they have to say male as many times as they possibly can. But what they end up doing is just literally just taking a standard misogynistic thing and just saying it again against trans people specifically. So this person says, a male who decides to make himself look like what he thinks sexually alluring to other males is making some interesting life choices if they then complain about how they're being objectified misogynistically. I could recommend they review their life. What they're saying here is, if you're a woman and you get sexual harassment, then it's your fault because you chose to transition. Which is just standard victim blaming, like, why did you choose to wear that? What was she wearing? What was she wearing? If someone's sexually assaulting you or sexually harassing you, it's their problem. if it's a man doing it to a woman, which is the most common of all the different setups, then it's probably misogyny, and that's kind of something that feminists should be interested in. But no gender critical people are up for applying feminist analysis across the board like this, or some of them are. Most of them aren't, because if they do, then it means that they can't say disgusting things to trans women. So all of a sudden they get transphobia brain rot. Transphobia rots your brain because, like, if you said to if some woman got a load of misogynistic comments and you said, like, this is horrible, why are they being misogynistic? And then you're like, oh, why did she choose to wear that? Then any feminist would instantly recognise that that's just bullshit apologist stuff for sexism. But if you say male 5 times in the same sentence, then suddenly it doesn't count and you can just say it to anyone you want. It's just disgusting. There really was quite a lot of brain rot in this one. Sorry, everyone. This is what happens when we don't have a central great juice fiasco. Like, there's not like some big thing to focus around. Then we just get every single week I get this much bullshit all the time. But when there's big focus points, I don't need to focus on it so much. But anyway, I hope you're getting a taster of what it's like to enjoy the gender critical movement's arguments and valid concerns. So this person has a valid concern about me calling them a science denier. So I said, I absolutely guarantee that gender critical people are more likely to be anti-vax than the general population, and vice versa. Science denial breeds science denial. I stand by that. I think that's almost certainly true. I'd be shocked if it wasn't. I've seen quite a few screenshots from gender critical groups where one of them said some sarcastic comment about anti-vaxxers and then all the rest have had a go at them. I mean, of course it does. It's all the same stuff. It's people thinking that big pharma are out to trick their kids into becoming something they don't want. Like, that's what anti-vax is, and that's what gender critical is. Anyway, this person who is completely incapable of cropping is like, science denial. And they got loads of people replying to it. But I was then like, so do you agree with the international experts on trans healthcare for adults and children? Were you horrified when the UK courts overruled the experts for trans healthcare? Because, like, that would be a very quick way for me to show you whether you're a science denier or not. Here's some science that I know that the majority of gender critical people disagree with. Do you disagree with it? And of course, they all do disagree with it. So the person who posted this is like, if the available evidence was robust, compelling, and unequivocal, that ruling wouldn't have happened. Which isn't true. The ruling was about consent, and it said to the doctors that it doesn't matter if you're all saying that the healthcare is good for the kids because we've decided you can't give it to them. And, all of the experts internationally then wrote a thing about how it was bad for trans kids and stuff. So, of course they're a science denier. I mean, obviously. Anyway, that was the least of the stupid replies that I got. I'd encourage waiting until a person is fully developed mentally before doing anything like this. They can make a decision led by their own thoughts and not influenced by their idols or entertainment in sports. This age is widely recognised as 25. This is when you see 25, it's a gender critical meme. They've got something that no one should be allowed to transition until they're 25. And it's some comment about when the brain stops developing, but it's not, because your brain carries on developing for your whole life, but some phase of brain development. It's not widely recognised. It doesn't make any sense at all. It's literally just the exact science denial that I was talking about. It's some made up excuse to try and deny children healthcare, which is exactly what the entire anti-vax movement is. That's literally the whole thing. And that's like half of the gender critical movement. The other half being some excuse to ban trans women from the toilets. So it's sort of like, this is such a classic example of exactly what I was talking about and what they were laughing at me for. And it wasn't the only one. And of course, we go through all of the standard anti-vax arguments. This person's like, but there are plenty of experts who disagree, which is the other classic anti-vax argument. Like, oh yeah, sure, some experts think the vaccines are good, but I've got 10 experts here who think it's bad, and that's an unlike. I retweet all of them all the time. Like, yeah, I'm sure that there's probably, there are some experts who disagree with basically every single medicine decision. There are experts who still think that COVID-19's made up, but like, they're idiots and they don't agree with the medical consensus or any of the main medical organisations. And that's exactly what anti-vaxxers do. And it's the science, it's the same excuses. Then they've got their nonsense. They used to chemically castrate paedophiles with the same medicine. Like, it's this thing, this meme where they share like the ingredients for vaccine always got mercury in it. You wouldn't drink mercury, so you wouldn't take a vaccine. And then it's like that thing, if you drank oxygen, you would die. Like, don't drink water. Yeah, it's the same. It's all the same patterns. It's exactly like all of this stuff coming up with excuses to not listen to the doctors and experts on healthcare always ends up looking like anti-vax, especially when it's for children, because it requires science denial. And that's exactly what I was talking about. And of course, the last classic anti-vaxxer thing that you always see is this. From this profile picture that we'll come on to in a second. Are we honestly going to pretend that the trans army hasn't bullied a huge number of people into acceptance under the threat of cancellation? Nothing to do with science. Yes, of course. All of the international medical organisations, including the World Health Organization, the APA, the NHS, WPATH, all of them are scared of being cancelled on Twitter by anime profiles. It's all a big conspiracy. That's why, vaccines are bad. It's just that, the World Health Organization is scared of being cancelled. That's what it is. That's what's really happened. That's like the trilogy of anti-vax replies there. I've got my own experts, actually. Oh, actually, it's just all a big conspiracy. And whatever the first one was, I now forgotten because my brain's rotted. Oh, yeah, and some made-up science about how actually it doesn't work. But this profile picture, this is J.K. Rowling as Jesus. It's not a cult, everyone. Please don't look. It's not a cult. Don't look. Joke. And then this genius, this reply actually I agree with. This guy talking about me says her delusion makes her a science denier. Yeah, good one, mate. I am opposed to people who oppose science. Okay, you got me. I put my hands up. So, this is an exciting revelation. A friend messaged me to be like, have you seen LGB Alliance's follow account? So, let's look on Social Blade. They average 19 followers a day. And we can see they got 6, 23, 57, 31, some followers every day. And then all of a sudden, overnight, they got 1,999. A bit of a suspicious number for a group that gets 19 a day on average, don't you think? Yeah, 100 times too many. So I pointed this out. Well, I didn't discover this, but, made some noise. Someone did this really cool analysis of their followers, which I hadn't seen before, but roughly had to explain what this is. So this is a graph of the follower order. So the first follower is here, and follower 500's here, and follower 1000's here, and so on. Goes along in time, and then up and down here is the year that they were created, or the date that they were created. So you can see that some of their first followers were created in 2009. And then they've got some created in 2018, and basically, if it's just legit normal accounts, if it's just normal accounts, then you just get this even random spread, like you see here in the middle. And then that suggests that they're just normal accounts. So I was talking to the people who made this, and apparently there's always this band at 2009, because that's the year that Twitter kicked off. So loads of accounts were made in 2009. So there's always a bias towards that number. LGB Alliance do have a lot that were created this year. Like, it's hard to say for sure, but more than you'd be expecting. And I think we all know why that is. Because they like made loads of sock accounts. But if you look at their latest, so right on the other side of the graph, their latest 1,999 followers, it's just suddenly different. Like, all of the accounts were created in this block in the middle. And none of them, you can see how the graph just suddenly changes at the end. And that's there's also another one here, which it's a bit harder to see, but it's a very strong giveaway of paying for fake followers. It's a bot that does all these followers because they were all created around the same time. And they did some more analysis on them, and it turns out that 75% of those 2,000 accounts have fewer than 5 followers, and 90% have fewer than 10 followers. They also then went on to say that like most of them have no tweets. Like, it's just transparently like these are obviously fake accounts. So almost certainly someone has paid for this. Not necessarily LGB Alliance, because they then citing the wrong word here, but they then went to say, we suddenly picked up a load of followers in the last 12 hours. They look like bots. Like, this was in reaction to us calling it out. Like, they wouldn't have done anything. Then like, should we soft block them? They blocked like 200 of them, and then now they've just carried on as if nothing happened. I actually think it's hard to say whether this is good or bad for them, because it's good because it makes them more credible. They just added on 2,000 followers like onto their account. And when you have more followers, it makes you look more credible, sadly. I mean, that's the only reason any of you are paying attention to me. So, but also if you have loads of, like, when Twitter shows your tweets to people, it's got this complicated algorithm. But if most of your followers or a lot of your followers are fake, then Twitter will choose to show them the tweets instead, and then they obviously won't interact with them, so you're less likely to get engagement. I know if you had like 1,000 legitimate followers and you paid for like 1,000 more, then half of your followers would be fake, so your engagement would be much lower. So then your tweets would perform much worse, because for having more followers you'll get less engagement than you would expect. So I don't know, it's hard to say whether this has benefited them or not. It depends how good Twitter's algorithm is, and it could change. And what might well happen is Twitter will find some... I mean, it's quite obvious what's happened here. Twitter might just suddenly discover this like little pot of bots, and it will delete them all, and LGB Alliance's follower account will now drop by 1,700 overnight. Might happen. It's happened before. Anyway, that one I just skipped over. Just worth pointing out, while we're talking about LGB Alliance and suspicious internet activity, Reddit banned one of their users for promoting hatred based on identity or vulnerability. And that meant that 25 subreddits were banned because they were all owned by the same person. And that was Alliance LGB UK, Alliance LGB, Alliance LGB UK, Alliance LGB UK, drop the T, drop the TQ, get the T out, LGB Alliance UK, like all of these ones, all these like things. There's a few other like transcritical / transphobe. Isn't it interesting that the We're Not Transphobic people who registered the LGB Alliance subreddit also registered / transphobe, and then they all got banned for hatred? Of course. Anyway, this is an old one. This is from April 2020. But I just saw it, and I was talking about LGB Alliance, and it just disgusted me. Like, when I read this, I was like, I involuntarily screwed my face up in disgust. So they're talking about some government announcement. They say, so this is LGB Alliance, the gay rights organisation, allegedly, blatantly not. We are clearly intended to be appalled that the 69% of young LGBT people, We are clearly intended to be appalled that 69% of young LGBT homeless people were rejected by their parents and suffered abuse within the family. This is likely to be true of all younger homeless people, citation needed. Comparative data matters and is not included. So, like, This is the kind of thing. It's just so frustrating because, you know, if I confronted some people on this today actually, and they're like, "Oh, so what? You don't need to look at it." Like, LGBT people are more likely to be homeless because they're more likely to be thrown out by their family. That's true. That's a statistic that is repeated all the time by so many different studies. And the government did a similar study and made a similar finding. And their first reaction to hearing that, you know, LGBT people are more likely to be homeless, more likely to be kicked out, more likely to have suffered abuse from their own family, was to be like, well, that's probably not true for everyone. There's nothing to do with LGBT. Like, it's just a standard, like, bigot reaction to instantly try and dismiss anything where you're like, LGBT people statistically have it worse in this domain. You're like, oh no, everyone has it bad, stop complaining. For sure, like, I care about all these homeless people, and loads of cis straight people also suffer abuse from their families and become homeless. Absolutely. Probably the majority of homeless people are cis straight people because there are a lot more of them. However, LGBT people do face unique pressures here, which is the whole point. They face homophobia, they face transphobia, which cis straight people do not. And LGB Alliance is like, what are they even doing? Why, like, if they don't like this, why are they commenting on it? It's just them making excuses for their homophobic, transphobic followers, like to try and drum up like dislike for the government's LGBT plans. It's just like, fuck off. What? It's just so bullshit to go out your way to do that. I hate them. It's disgusting people. So we're nearing the end, and we're back into ridiculous conspiracy theory territory. So this is one of Gremlin Hand's podcast friends who says, so we've got some idiot who said, mainly white bourgeois trans-identified people, they have so much tedious language for this, trans-identified people, trans people, especially members of the male sex sexually orientated towards the opposite sex, appropriate male-perpetuated murders of mainly black and brown homosexual people living... What they're trying to say here is white trans women, which is like the first block of the stuff here, or even rich white trans women, try and appropriate the murders of poor trans women of colour. You could make the argument without saying male sex sexually orientated sex towards the opposite male identified trans, like, fuck off. It's like, it's kind of a nonsense point. You know, sometimes rich white people do that. But then also, the only trans people that most of the media and stuff listens to are the rich white trans people. And it's important to get the message out. Like, I would never want to appropriate the, you know, increased violence that these groups face, you know, for not being rich and white like me. But I really want to raise noise about it because it's horrific. And, you know, they're attacked for being trans, but they're also attacked extra, and they face the pressures of being trans even worse because they are part of other minority groups. And as soon as you mention it, they'll accuse you of appropriating it because they just don't want you to talk about it. Because, you know, they don't want people hearing about the difficulty that trans people face, which is why it's so important to talk about it. Because lots of people just don't know about this stuff. And when anyone tries to bring it up, they always try and silence them because they know it wins people over. Anyway, podcast man here says, some wealthy straight white males cross-sex identify to feel sexy, and they're hiding behind impoverished gay black and brown males who cross-sex identify to survive. Gender identity is a language meant to blur the distinction between these two groups who are polar opposites. Of kind for all their bullshit language. Like, look how many words between the two of them they've written here to say rich white trans women face different experiences to poor black trans women. But he's added in an extra layer of crazy. He's saying that the white wealthy ones transition, cross-sex identify, transition to feel sexy, whereas black people do it to survive. What are you talking about? Literally nowhere in the world would someone transition to survive. Okay, I know as soon as I said that, I was like, what about Iran? It's a complicated situation in Iran, and rarely some people who are condemned to death for being gay have been pressured to transition to escape being killed for that. That isn't what he's talking about here. This is referencing to how the murder rate of black trans women in the USA is horrifically high, like it's a proper epidemic. And like he's suggesting there's some kind of dichotomy between the white trans women who transition for sex and black ones who transition to survive. It just doesn't make any sense. No one transitions to survive. Like, people transition and then die. Sorry, that's really grim. It's just so detached from reality. They just make these things up to each other, and they use all these stupid long words to try and hide how utterly nonsense this is. It just makes absolutely no sense at all. Anyway, talking about Gremlin Han, we're going to end on a high. This is incredibly petty, and I wouldn't be bringing it up at all, apart from he got upset by it, so... I overtook him on YouTube subscribers. So thank you very much for everyone who has subscribed. I really genuinely appreciate it. I mean, I appreciate it because it's cool that people want to watch TERF Wars and want to watch the XX Factor, which is on tomorrow, where me and Krista Peterson discuss the gender critical movement and it being a conspiracy theory. And, you know, it's good to have a platform to talk about trans issues and get them out there to people who don't know about it. But also, it is good to overtake the, like, you know, the leading anti-trans voices. And, you know, like, he didn't have a very big platform. You know, 6,000 subscribers is quite a lot, but, you know, some of them have, like, 35. I think Posey Park's got, like, 35,000. We'll get there eventually. We'll do it, team. Come on, we can do it. Anyway, I made this as, like, a little target for myself, because I saw that I was on, like, 5,000. I saw he was on, like, 6,000. I was like, I'm going to try and overtake him. And I did it, and it was like a little goal. And so I posted about it. Here's the graph. It's the moment where I did it. Like, it's not like that exciting. You know, 6,000 subs it's not 10,000, is it? He didn't like it. So this is that thing that people were posting about. Oh, I can't wait to go to Graham's blog to see what he's posted about this tweet. He does post about tweets on his blog, which is very exciting. You should subscribe to it and pay £300 a year or whatever the subscription fee is. I think it is £300 a year. Then here he's made some attempt at dismissing, like he's trying to deflect from it. He's totally not mad about this, basically. How do I tap into the closeted gay men demographic? So this is just some generic anti-LGBT sort of slur about how the only people who would listen, like it's a combination of like LGBT, anti-LGBT bullshit and just kind of misogyny. Like the only reason that anyone would listen to a woman is because they fancy her. Like that's what he's saying here. But then he's also doing the classic, oh, if you fancy trans women, you're gay, which is like the oldest, lamest insult. And so he's like, oh, you know, the only reason that she's got any subscribers is because they're all closeted gay men. Just pathetic, really. So shout out to all of my closeted gay men followers. I'm sure there are some closeted gay men out there, and, you know, I support you and I love you, and I hope that you feel safe to come out one day. I would be very surprised if you fancied me. But who knows? Yes. I'm sorry, I'm not interested. Anyway, and whilst I was just picking out some classics, we're just going to end on this one. This is another one I was just searching for. I think as well, I was actually looking for some LGB Alliance stuff, and I just saw this. It was kind of disgusted me. So anyone who's been on YouTube for like several years has probably heard, or at least in the feminist and LGBT space, has probably heard of Anita Sarkeesian. In Gamergate, which was like some big misogynist movement, Anita Sarkeesian was one of the targets, like, of this huge, like, bigger than the backlash against trans people at the moment, though potentially that might be as bad as it gets, who knows. But a huge misogynist backlash over computer games, because like people like Anita Sarkeesian were saying things like, you know, computer games are written for men with like the male ideal in mind, and that's why it's always a strong hero saving a weak princess. You know, like, it's kind of basic media analysis. It's not basic, she's very good at what she does, but like, that's a fairly basic analysis to make. You know, if there are 100 games come out and 99 of them you're a prince rescuing a princess and one it's the other way around, then it's like, why? Anyway, back in the day before he lost his mind, he was like on the like feminist side, fighting against the Gamergate people. So Anita Sarkeesian said, I think this was like middle of last year, said it must have been just before he got suspended for hateful conduct. She said, feminism is about equality, justice, and liberation. If you don't support the rights of trans people or access to abortion, or don't support efforts like Black Lives Matter or workers' rights, as just a few examples, you are not a feminist. You know, I agree. Feminism, for sure, is about analysing misogyny and liberating women from patriarchal oppression. But as soon as you start doing that, as soon as you start analysing why these pressures and prejudices exist, you see how they link with the other ones. You know, the reason we talk about the patriarchy rather than like just specifically misogyny is because it puts these pressures on like the family unit and you know, family values and this kind of stuff, which is things like women should stay at home and look after the kids and always be pregnant barefoot in the kitchen, and men should be out on the battlefields or in the workshops. Like, that's a classic patriarchy, socially conservative position, but that also pressures gay people because it says women are for making babies, men are for, you know, providing for the family, so you can't have two men leading a family, you can't have two women leading a family. And it fights against trans people because you're born for your role. Like, that's a core part of the patriarchy. Like, if you're born this, you do this. If you're born this, you do this. Which sounds very much like gender critical, I suppose. But she's right here, and it does end up tying in with fights against racism and fights against class equality, because all of these things, this is what intersectional feminism is about. All of these things affect people worse when they are more than one of these groups. If you're a woman, you're likely to face misogyny. If you're black, you're likely to face racism in a way that men and white people don't. And if you're both a woman and a black person, then you end up facing both these things and a combination of these things, and they can overlap in ways which add up to kind of more than the sum of their parts. And it's important to analyse all this and understand it all and be able to combat it. Anyway, I agree with her whole comment there. I think it's quite good. I don't know what you feel. It's just kind of a generic pro-minority rights position. And then he said, what is this male pandering shite? I didn't support you during Gamergate so you could give women's rights away to another group of men. Like, this is so entitled, so self-centered, and so telling. It's like, I didn't support you just so you would betray me. Like, you shouldn't have been supporting her for any reason at all other than the fact that she was right. Like, the reason that you should have been fighting against this misogynistic harassment of feminist media critics is because it's misogynistic. Like, it doesn't matter whether you like her or not. It doesn't matter. Even if her other opinions were bad, being misogynistic to her is wrong because misogyny is bad. Like, this is just so basic. But like, I didn't support you just so you could betray me, like kind of attitude, like fuck off, just trying to manipulate her into agreeing with you. It's so pathetic. And then so you could give women's rights way to another group. I mean, he's obviously talking about trans people. She just said trans people. Like, he's completely ignored the abortion and the Black Lives Matter and the workers' rights because he doesn't care at all. Just like, look at this comment. It's so pathetic. My goodness. Grow up. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone, for surviving through this week, which was pretty brain rot. I'm sure you will agree. If you feel like your brain has just rotted out, go back and watch last week's episode about the juice again, because that was pretty funny. Thank you very much for sticking around and watching the TERF Wars. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone had a really good time. And I will be back next week, 9 p.m. UK time, to go through the next week's worth of bullshit, which I'm sure they'll have some new scheme. Like, when I do these episodes, it's from the last Friday until this Thursday. So today's worth of stuff is already going to be a next episode. And, like, today we've had a whole fiasco with Stonewall. Like, there's going to be some good stuff in next week already. Let's see which religion I get accused of joining next time. I'm not a Scientologist, I promise. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone, and I will see you all soon. Lots of love for everyone in the chat. I love you. Bye.